guys, today we're going to talk about writing numbers in standard versus scientific notation. So go ahead and write this in your notes. So first we have standard, and then we are going to look at scientific notation. So we have two ways of writing numbers. The first way is the normal way, the way you guys have been writing numbers forever, right? So you're gonna see numbers that are big, like 670,000, or you might see numbers that are small. So you might, and that's not a negative, it's just a bullet point. I'm gonna change these into bullet points. Or you might see a number that's like 0.039. So here's the really cool thing. We have scientific notation, and scientific notation is really just a shortened version of writing numbers. And mathematicians and even scientists like to use scientific notation just to shorten things up. So it's a shortened version of writing numbers. All right, cool. So let's go back to this first number we had. In scientific notation, we could write it like 6.7 times 10 to the 5th power. Here's the cool thing. These are the exact same number. They're just written two different ways, but they have the same value, or they're equivalent to one another. Okay, so those are really big numbers. Let's look at a really small number now. So in standard, we had this written as 0.039. Well, in scientific notation, we could write that like 3.9 times 10 to the negative 3rd power. Again, two different ways of writing things, but they have the same value, or they're equivalent to one another. And it's really important to note, guys, that here we had a big number, and when we have a big number, check out that power. So we had 6.7 times 10 to the 5th power. That power is positive. In big numbers, we'll see our power is positive. Whereas now, check out our smaller number. Our smaller numbers in scientific notation will have a negative power. So the power is negative. And think about that, guys. That even goes back to our number line. When you guys learned number lines, when numbers got bigger, they moved to the right. So if this was like an old school number line, and I had 1, 2, 3, 4, when numbers get bigger, it goes to the right. And when numbers get smaller, it goes to the left. I know that's a little bit of review, but it's going to be a key concept that we're going to see later in our notes. All right, sweet. So now that we know and understand what the difference is between those two ways of writing numbers, we want you to be able to write numbers in both notations, and we want you to be able to go between the two of them. So the first way we're going to look at, and if you want to, you can totally split your notes like I'm going to right now. We're going to take a look at what happens when we start with a number in standard form or standard notation, and we want to change it to scientific. So we're going to look at two examples, and I'm going to give you guys some steps. So what if I had a number like 8450000. So really big number. I'm just putting commas in so I can read it to you guys. So this number is 84,500,000, and we want to write it into scientific notation. All right, so if that's the case, our first step So step number 1, we are going to write a decimal point between numbers that aren't 0. Some people like to say that have the value between 1 and 10, but I think it's easier to think about it as if it's not between 0. So I'm going to rewrite this just so we can see this a little bit differently. 8, 4, 5, 1, 2, 2, 3. And now I'm going to write a decimal between the first two numbers that are not 0. So the first two numbers right here are 8 and 4. Pop your decimal between those two numbers. All right, step 2. If we have a big number, so if it's a big number, we're going to scoot to the right. If it's a small number, which we'll see in our second example, we're going to scoot to the left. And that goes back to the review we just had. So this is a big number. So I'm going to start at my decimal point and I'm going to scoot right until I get to the end. So watch, guys, and I want you to write this exactly like I am. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I scooted 7 times. So your third step, just like we just did, count the amount of times you scoot. Okay, so now I'm going to rewrite my number. I had 8.45. That was where we wrote our decimal. Now that I've counted the amount of times I scooted, my fourth step is I'm going to write a base, or times a base of 10. So times base of 10. I'm just going to add more steps on my sheet of paper. Hopefully you have room. If you don't have room, you can flip the page or do whatever you need to do. So if my number was big, so if it's a big number, my power is going to be positive. And if I have a small number, I'm going to have a negative power. So remember, guys, going back to my problem, we scooted 7 times, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The amount of times I scoot is my power. And step 4 told me if it was big, it's positive. So this is my answer. I have 8.45 times 10 to the 7th power. This number and this number are exactly the same. They have the same value. They're just written 2 different ways. Okay, let's see what that looks like if we have a smaller number. And I'm just going to scoot my notes up. So let's say this time we have a number like, so here's another example. If we have a number like 0.00036, and we want to write it in scientific notation, we're going to go through a similar process. Okay, so step 1, and I'm going to scoot this over, told us that we need to write a decimal point between numbers that aren't 0. Well, the first 2 numbers I see are 3.6, so I'm going to write a decimal point there. Step 2 is how we're scooting, but this time I have a smaller number. So I'm going to scoot to the left. and we need to count the amount of times we scoot. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And you're gonna scoot until you hit that original decimal. So now I need to rewrite it with my number 3.6. I need that base of 10, so times the base of 10. We scooted 6 times, so that's my power. But again, if I have a small number, which I do, I need a negative power. So here it should be 3.6 times 10 to the negative 6th power. These two numbers have the same value, they're equal, but it's just two different ways of writing it. All right, guys, I'm gonna stop part 1 of our video. Go ahead and watch part 2 of the second video. In the second video, you guys are gonna learn how to go from scientific notation to standard.